Gold's dumped over 20% in the past 3 weeks, and Bitcoin has been grinding higher. Gold's market cap hit a peak of $36 trillion only months ago, but so far, since January, $7 trillion has now flowed out of gold. And everybody is now asking the same question. Where did that capital go? And what are the reasons that capital is flowing out of gold? Well, since the war began in the Middle East, gold's down currently 17%, SP500 is down 8%, and Bitcoin is actually up 7%. And for over 17 years, every time that we've seen a huge gold rally, capital would flow out of gold and into Bitcoin, or out of precious metals and into Bitcoin. So the question I'm asking is this the beginning of capital rotating out of gold and into Bitcoin at the exact bottom of Bitcoin's bear market? Well, I guess to be clear, we don't know if it's the bottom yet, but it does feel a little bottomy, okay? I know the algos are trading on sentiment, and currently, I don't know. I'm just an optimist here, guys. I'm like, I keep having these arguments with Nico. I'm like, dude, we bottom. He's still like, we need a capitulation move. Anyways, enough of that. Let's get into the story, because it is very interesting what's going on currently with gold. If you watch the gold price over the weekend, and actually before I get into what's actually happening with the gold price, let's talk about why we talk about the gold price. Obviously, gold is our big cousin, our big brother in the hard money game. Gold is the quote unquote reserve neutral store of value. In the face of global uncertainty, in the face of war, you would think that people would want to stack gold, especially when you're seeing what's going on with oil, with the recent inflation numbers. Things are getting kind of crazy. But currently, gold's not really acting how we all would expect it to act in the face of the war in the Middle East. And Bitcoin is. And this is where the big question is happening. Has the baton been passed to Bitcoin currently? Are people starting to see Bitcoin as the neutral reserve store of value asset that we believe and know it is to be? That is the big question right now. There is a good narrative. There's a good point to be made that maybe the capital is rotating from gold into Bitcoin. There might be a larger story at play right now. So that's the context here. I know you guys troll me in the chat that we're now simply gold because we've been talking about gold, or simply fiat because we've been talking about the fiat price and what's going on in TradFi, et cetera, et cetera. No, we are still simply Bitcoin, but we are a news show and we have to cover what goes on in all the markets, because Bitcoin no longer lives in a vacuum. It is a global macro asset now, as we've seen it in the last year or so. Ever since Trump went so pro-Bitcoin, ever since BlackRock announced an ETF, Bitcoin is in the mainstream consciousness. It is being treated as a macro asset. It's no longer just, reserved to the dark corners of the internet. It's in the highest rooms, the highest conversations right now. It's still early in that process, but it's in the room now. We are in the room now. We are part of the conversation. And most people just still are wholly unaware of what Bitcoin is, what it's going to do, what this trajectory is going to happen in the next couple of years. It's very interesting time. So enough of that. Let's get into the recent story. So there's an interesting headline here from Yahoo Finance. And it goes, BlackRock and Fidelity buy $400 million in Bitcoin as gold enters a bear market. Is institutional capital rotating? That is the question. That's the headlines. I know I've seen some Bitcoiners, some of my friends online saying, oh, we're seeing the capital rotation that we've been talking about. Finally, it's coming into Bitcoin. Bitcoin did have a pretty good, response this morning. Over the weekend, it did dump to about 68K. It got as high as 71K this morning. I think currently it's around 70K. But just reading a little key takeaway, BlackRock and Fidelity, of course, institutional capital, were net buyers of Bitcoin last week. To really get into the numbers, institutional capital, sorry, not just they. The ETF saw an outflow of about $250 million, but they also saw an inflow of about $400 million. So a net profit, or a net inflow of net buyers here of $150 million are going into the ETFs currently, which in the grand scheme of things, it's not the biggest number, but it is very interesting to see this happen. especially when you get the second key takeaway, that gold has now officially entered a bear market. Again, the current price before the show was gold is around 17% drop since the war started. It did get as low as 20 something percent. I think it was 22. So you're wondering, you're like, okay, are the institutional investors starting to see Bitcoin as that neutral reserve asset? That is the question I'm going to keep beating into your head for the next 20, 30 minutes, okay? And then this last point is where the big contention happens. The rotation narrative remains contested. You can make a case that it's happening. You could also make a case for various different reasons for why gold has dropped, and I will cover those later. Obviously, since the war in the Middle East happened, we really have no clue what exactly the timeline is for this war. There's been a lot of conversations that we're in another forever war. There's been a lot of people saying, okay, it's going to end 2 to 4 weeks like the Trump administration said. And I will cover that a little bit later in the news because we saw some crazy whipsaw volatility in the S&P 500 this morning over the weekend about some of Trump's response. It's literally trading like a shitcoin. It's absolutely insane what's going on in TradFi right now. But anyways, I think the real conversation here is when you go deeper into this article. Obviously, gold topped. It seems like it's over. I know I saw some people saying that gold finally going back to one of the support areas that it has. This is healthy for the market. I think for a lot of us Bitcoiners, we're looking at the gold market and we're just like chomping at the bits. We're like, okay, the gold run's finally over. Let's get that capital into Bitcoin. Let's get this bull run back on in order. Come on, guys. Let's really change what's going on. Anyways, this is where it gets interesting. Is this a rotation or is this a temporary decoupling? Maybe the decouple from Bitcoin to everything else is happening differently. Again, I will expand on that a little later, but I do like where we talk about the gold losing its bull market. It dropped. It's down 20% from all-time high. Of course, it's leading a lot of people to say that this is a quintessential technical bear market, that gold is in a bear market now. And of course, the decline, as it says in this article, surprised almost everyone. Given that gold typically strengthens during periods of geopolitical tension, we're seeing the opposite happen right now, which is what I said about Bitcoin when the war was announced that following Monday when the markets opened. I was expecting it to drop. Even this morning, I was expecting it to drop. We're seeing the opposite happen. Bitcoin is going up. I wouldn't say it's pumping, it's exploding. I did see some people say it's exploding, but 68 to 71 just doesn't feel like an explosion, but maybe that's just because I'm a jaded Bitcoiner. And an explosion to me, we're waiting for the 10K green candle here. We're waiting for the Omega candle. That would be an explosion. Not a few lousy $1,000 on the price. Anyways, this is, again, where the conversation is super interesting. We don't know what's going on in the Middle East. We heard initially, the initial report was it's only going to be 2 to 4 days. The idea that Trump launches an attack, the Venezuela model launches an attack after markets close Friday, and then by Monday, before the markets open, everything's back to normal. Well, we're on week 4 now. Officially 3 weeks in this war. We're going into the 4th week. There is a couple new announcements that I will cover later on in the show. Maybe they have it. Maybe there is a plan here. I'm not a plan truster, but maybe there's a plan to end this war by the 1 month mark. Maybe the more cynical view of an endless war, Iraq 2.0, which is basically the two prevailing narratives right now. With all that being said, gold bear market seems to be, at least in the very beginning stages of, they just entered a bear market. This is what leads everyone to think, are we seeing a rotation into Bitcoin? Or rather, just a general rotation out of gold currently? Like, what are the reasons for gold selling off? And precious metals at large. Silver had to sell off. Also, equities, again, are going up and down like a shitcoin. It's crazy stuff out here. A lot of people are saying, I have a good meme for you guys. I know you guys love the meme review of Trump essentially turning the White House into a trading desk. Who knows? You know, Barron's out here making a killing, as far as we all like to joke. But anyways, despite the sell-off, JP Morgan analysts described the move as a, quote, extremely brutal flush, but maintained a constructive long-term outlook. The longer the energy disruption persists and the greater the impact on inflation and growth, the more likely it is that gold's backdrop turns materially bullish again. So JP Morgan is looking at gold. Technically, it's in a bear market, but they're still kind of bullish on gold. So let's look over here. I'm going to flip over to the gold chart. We're not doing TA. I'm just showing you the price, the current price. It is currently at $4,388 per ounce. And you can see here, if you're watching right now on YouTube and you're not listening, this, drawdown price change is basically from the start of the war to current prices, which is down 17%. But if you go further to where this dip went, it was down 22.39%. Absolutely brutal move in gold right now. I know I joked a little while ago about buying gold at the top. You don't want to be that guy right now. We only buy Bitcoin tops here, okay? We're only okay with buying Bitcoin tops because we know eventually it's going to go up. I would not want to be buying gold or silver tops or even equity tops right now because who knows what's going on. It's absolutely insane. Now, again, as I was saying, the big conversation here is, are we seeing $7 trillion of capital leave gold and potentially waiting for, who knows what they're waiting for, to enter into Bitcoin? Are they diversifying their portfolio? Are they just sitting in cash, which I think that is probably what's playing out here. I think the big move is there's obviously a good logical narrative you can make that we will see some of that capital rotate in the Bitcoin. If we do see gold enter a prolonged bear market, if it goes further than 20%, I think you can make a good case that there will be some of that capital rotating into Bitcoin. Will it be a significant portion of that 7, 8, 10, who knows how many trillions going into Bitcoin? I don't think it'll be all of it. That's what multiples of the Bitcoin market cap. 7 trillion since January, since the top of gold, all-time high, going into Bitcoin. That's what, 4x the Bitcoin market cap or 3x the Bitcoin market cap, 2.5 to 3x. That's a huge jump. If all that capital did go into Bitcoin, which I don't think is what's going to happen, but if a portion of that goes into Bitcoin, we could reclaim the $2 trillion market cap very quickly. We could be at the tail end of a bear market. I know we are all looking at the 4-year cycle, which we would expect that the bear market would bottom or at least have a reversal around October of this year. Depends what bear market numbers you're looking at. If you're looking at a bear market in dollar terms in Bitcoin, then October would realistically be when we'd see a final bottom and we start to have a reversal. When you look at Bitcoin priced in gold, that usually lasts 14 months. We have passed that 14-month time frame. I think we're currently in the 14th, about to go into the 15th. I'll have to double check that for you guys right now. But we are currently, at least historically, in the bear market is over territory when you price Bitcoin in gold. So the question is, obviously, what is that capital doing leaving gold? I know people are saying that gold's being manipulated. You know, they're shutting off the gold bull run because they don't want people to escape. They don't want people to flee. They don't want a sovereign store of wealth, store of value like gold to continue to proliferate or even further. That the gold bull run that we saw last year was wholly controlled. They basically hit an exit valve and they're like, hey, we want gold to run right now because, you know, central banks were buying gold. Everyone's trying to get a good little gain there. And so they pretty much took their foot off the pedal or put their foot off the ceiling so that gold could run. That's what a lot of people have been saying. So if you're looking at gold, I know the more hopium-based view here is, oh, capital rotation. Gold bull runs over. It's in a bear market. That capital is going to flow into Bitcoin. But again, all of our models are broken. I think a more realistic take of what is happening in gold is we are currently in essentially a liquidity crisis. And so it's not an inflation-driven crisis yet. Yes, we are seeing that the Pentagon is asking for $200 billion. We're seeing that the Fed is doing their own repo purchases. They're buying their own dollars. If this war goes on any longer, we are going to see prices rise because of oil prices going up, though oil now is currently around $88 per barrel. So I don't think it's an inflation crisis right now. I don't think that the move to gold is because of inflation concerns. I think what we're seeing with gold repricing is there is a liquidity crunch right now. I think people are probably sitting in dollars. They're sitting in cash currently because they don't know what's going on. Now, obviously, from a Bitcoiner's perspective, it's a dumb move, in our opinion, to go into cash. It's like you're losing, 2% a year at minimum. Depends on the numbers. Truflation says it's somewhere around 1.5%. Most people on the street, on Twitter, are saying it's probably closer to 7%. Either way, sitting in cash for the long term, you are losing purchasing power. So I don't think they're sitting in cash for the long term. I don't think they're using the dollar or any fiat currency as a store of value. I think what they're probably doing is they're taking a little bit off the top with gold, probably sitting in cash. They're trying to make sense what's going on in the Middle East. They're trying to make sense in what's going on with equities. Are we pricing in a long war? Are we pricing in the end of this war? They're trying to get their chips in a row, their ducks in a row. They're trying to get into cash. Yes, they went into gold last year. They made a pretty good gain. Now they're sitting in cash and waiting to deploy that capital. That's probably my take on what's going on. I do think some of that capital will eventually find its way into Bitcoin, obviously. But what are the factors that people are waiting on? Most people are saying that they're waiting for the, quote, Clarity Act, regulatory clarity to happen so that they can actually start to deploy capital. Well, we did get some clarity, some regulatory clarity, not from the Clarity Act, but from the SEC and the CFTC last week. And I have a new clip about that. I'm going to play that for you in a minute. So maybe, as I was kind of speculating on the show, the clarity is coming from the SEC and the CFTC and not necessarily coming from Congress, which is still good for the markets. People are feeling a little better about where they can put their capital. They're feeling a little better about the quote-unquote digital asset industry at large. And they're just waiting to see, are we out of a bear market? Are we going to go lower? I think people are stacking up their dollars so that they can deploy their capital either into the stock market or into Bitcoin or into oil stocks, into oil itself, into oil futures. I think this is probably what's happened in gold currently. But it does beg the question, and this is why I put Peter Schiff on the thumbnail today, because, he's been out there for years, literally years, saying Bitcoin is not a store of value. He was able to do his victory lap last year. He did his I told you so. I told you gold was going to run. He only had to wait a decade or something, but hey, I'll let you take your dance. But currently, we're seeing Bitcoin act as we know it to act and know it to be, which is the sovereign, neutral, reserve asset, reserve currency, reserve money of the world, the reserve store of value that no one controls, that is not dependent on the state. It's separate from the state. It's separate from the money printer. It's outside of the traditional financial system. And it's acting in a way that makes you think, is this the decoupling happening? Maybe it's just not happening in the way that we thought it would. And that, I think, is the interesting kind of perspective of what's going on. Again, I've been saying this since the war started. I've been very surprised at how resilient Bitcoin has been acting in the last 3 weeks. I was really expecting to have basically our third black swan since October 10th with this war and Bitcoin dumping, and we finally get that flush that we're all expecting. That hasn't happened. That's the interesting view here, is like, was our perspective of the Bitcoin decoupling from traditional markets, not how we expected it. And this is where I'm going to bring up my boy Fernando, Base Layer from Bitcoin Perception. I think he's been doing a very great job on Twitter. And he did this tweet here. And of course, he's dunking on Peter Schiff. So he goes, gold has been crashing for 9 straight days, 9 in a row. What say you, Peter Schiff? And it's crashing during an oil shock, during war escalation, during exactly the environment that gold was built for, or rather the environment that the thesis on why you want to own gold was built upon. And this was a little while ago. Currently, Bitcoin's at 70K. And we keep reading these headlines of, oh, Bitcoin crashed because of the war. It's weighing a lot on crypto, which is technically true. We haven't pumped. We haven't really broken out of this 70K, 60K range. But that's not looking at the whole picture. It's not telling you what's happening in equities and gold or precious metals, what's happening in oil, what's happening in bonds. It's not telling you all of this about Bitcoin. It's just telling you about Bitcoin in a vacuum. But in the context of everything going on, it's super, super interesting that Bitcoin didn't crash under 60K to 50, 40, 30K, what have you. The fact we're holding here where we are, I think that is all the signal that we really need. Anyways, he goes on. But again, they're not giving you the context here. Stocks drop more and bonds are getting hammered. That was supposed to protect you during chaos is failing. And Fernando used to work at Blockstream. He says, we used to talk about this all the time. What does Bitcoin decoupling actually look like? We all assumed it meant Bitcoin goes up while everything else stayed flat. But currently we're seeing maybe it just means everything goes down a lot and Bitcoin doesn't go down as much. Maybe the answer to this is simply there's just not that much sellers. Like, who is selling Bitcoin right now? I think the 1010 crash really got rid of all the sellers or most of them. And then the November 6th crash, I don't think there's really that many people that are selling. I don't think anyone has any coin to sell. I think everyone that wanted to sell is selling, has already sold. And everyone here is like, we're all true Bitcoin believers. We're holding this for the long term. Well, it turns out maybe that is the bigger story here. Maybe this is how the decoupling works in Bitcoin. Maybe this is what it looks like. And I'll pull up the chart again. This is the Bitcoin chart. I'm not chart boying here, but you can see Bitcoin currently at $70,713. And again, my price chart here is the start of the war, and Bitcoin is currently up 7%. Where if you go a little higher, you know, to the highs, it was up 13, almost 14%. So gold down 17%. Equities are down about 8%. I'm averaging here. And Bitcoin's up 7%. Is this where we come to understand all of our models are really broken? Every thesis, minus the fact that Bitcoin is a sovereign, neutral store of value, world reserve currency, the money of the future, digital money for a digital world. Maybe, you know, yes, 4-year cycle seemingly still intact. Every other model completely thrown out the window. Our idea of what Bitcoin decoupling was doesn't really play out exactly as we expected. Again, you know, maps are good to understand the terrain, or what's the saying? You know, maps don't define the terrain. It just helps you understand the landscape. I forget what it is. You guys know me. I suck at quotes and whatnot here. But that is the huge question. Are we seeing something change? And that's been kind of my thesis here for a minute. It really does feel things have fundamentally changed. Yes, maybe the 4-year cycle is intact, but everything underlying Bitcoin, all the fundamentals, not that the fundamentals has changed per se in terms of the Bitcoin network, the software, you know, it's not a rule change in Bitcoin, but I think the perception and the narrative around what Bitcoin is and what it can do and what it will do for people, I think that perception has fundamentally shifted, which I think is going to really change the trajectory of where Bitcoin is going. Not in terms of dollar price, we know what that's doing, but in terms of how Bitcoin moves within the 4-year cycle. Again, everyone's waiting till October saying basically, hey, we just got to buckle down, survive for the next 6 months, and then Bitcoin's going to do its thing. You know, like clockwork, the simulation is going to play out exactly as we knew it was. 4-year cycle intact. We hit it perfectly. We're going to get a drop. You know, it's going to go 80%, and then Bitcoin's going to run back up like we all know it is. Now that we have institutional investors in Bitcoin, now that Wall Street is here, a bear market for them is usually 4 months. Again, in dollar price, we're at that 4 months mark. Maybe we're not going to see a huge capitulation event. Maybe we will. In gold terms, we are already at the end of a bear market, 14-month mark. So it's very interesting when you kind of think about all this. Is capital rotating from gold into Bitcoin? I think it's kind of a weak case. There is a case to be made, but I think it's a weak case. But we are seeing Bitcoin hold out really good right now. Now, obviously, that can change on a dime. But if we do see Bitcoin start to climb up, if it climbs back up past 70K, 75K, gets as high as maybe 84K, that's where it gets very, very interesting. Though I have seen, what's the guy, Ben Cohen? He did say, and he's notorious bear right now. He's like 4-year cycle is perfectly intact. He was saying we'll see a kind of a bull trap in March. It'll climb up, and then we're going to have another leg down. That is a common sentiment right now. That could be playing out as well. But if we don't see that, and Bitcoin is seemingly decoupling right now from traditional markets, it is very interesting because gold and silver have wiped out all their year-to-date gains. They're back to zero. And even though our year hasn't been the best, considering what happened last year, Bitcoin is the one that's winning. Guys, the question is this what winning feels like? Is this what winning feels like? Mr. President, if you can hear me, I am tired of winning. I never knew winning would be this demoralizing. I thought it would be fun. That's the question. Is Bitcoin winning? By the numbers, I would say yes. And I obviously, long-term history, 17 years, Bitcoin is obviously winning. But in the short term, again, zooming in to the short-term price action, the short-term movements of Bitcoin in the face of multiple black swans for Bitcoin, it's hard to look at the data and not say Bitcoin is winning currently. Is it a decouple? Maybe. Is capital rotating to Bitcoin? I think it's a weak case to say, but there is a case to be made. I think people are sitting in cash because they really have no idea what's going on. You wake up one morning, Trump tweets something, the markets react, the markets close, he tweets literally the exact opposite. The markets start pricing that in. You wake up in the morning, price the market at open 9:30. It goes crazy. Then midday, something else is tweeted. The price crashes. It's insane out there. And Bitcoin just keeps chugging along. Very interesting times, to say the least. And I'm not just saying that because, of course, I'm a Bitcoiner and this is like a show and you guys always yell at me about clickbait. I think this is super interesting time because of what you guys have been saying, because I'm the quote unquote macro expert here, which I'm really not. I'm trying to understand Bitcoin in the context of the macro geopolitical landscape that we currently find ourselves in. Bitcoin, the way it's been acting, it's super interesting in terms of the macro landscape, the macro outlook. It really does feel like Bitcoin is starting to take its rightful role in the center of global macro geopolitical landscape, economy, however you want to put it. Bitcoin is doing great. I know we're jaded. I know we want the dopamine rush of price going absolutely crazy. But I think the fact that Bitcoin is still going sideways, as, you know, pat myself on the back, as I said it was, and now it's going to dump. Watch, it's going to dump right now. I think that is the signal. I know a lot of people will always say the Bitcoin price doesn't matter, guys. You know, there's more interesting things about Bitcoin. I totally agree. But price is the signal. In a free market, the price of a thing is the signal in and of itself. And we're currently at 70K. I don't know, guys. I'm starting to feel a little bullish. I don't want to get too bullish. I don't want to get my hopes up. I'm doing the let's not get too excited, but it feels pretty good. I'm not going to lie. It feels pretty good to sit here and look at old Peter Schiff and be like, yo, what happened to gold, bro? And we're sitting on our measly 7% gains. Hey, I'm going to take the win. I'm going to take the victory lap. I know the Big Short, don't dance. If I can't dance, if I can't laugh, I'm just going to be crying. Okay. So we're going to do a little cha-cha. Well, we're going to do a little I told you so cha-cha, because Bitcoin's doing exactly as it was designed to do. And it's beautiful to watch. I'm here for it. We'll be here for it. Let's see what happens towards the end of this year and further towards the end of potentially a conclusion in the Middle East in not a war, but an operation or just a mission. I don't even know what they're classifying it now. Is it a time thing? Is it a legal distinction of whether this is a war? Is there going to be troops on the ground? Who even knows? I'm sure even Trump doesn't know. One morning he says one thing, later in the afternoon he changes his mind. But I'm just sitting pretty in Bitcoin. Let the world figure their stuff out. We just want to acquire more Bitcoin. Make sure you have more Bitcoin today than you had yesterday. That's the winning play. The only winning move is not to play in the fiat game. Just start stacking Bitcoin. Continue to accumulate Bitcoin. That is the winning move. The winning move is don't stop accumulating Bitcoin. Love or hate Sailor. I don't know if you saw, but he bought another 1,000 coins this morning or last week, which I think now the total is about 42,000 coins he's bought in the last 2 weeks or 14, 15 days. You just play the same game he's playing. Just continue to accumulate. Yes, we don't have basically free capital to buy Bitcoin, but you just need to keep accumulating Bitcoin. That's the name of the game. All right, guys, I'll be right back, and we will be chatting about the SEC and CFTC rules, what this means for the market, why I think it's probably going to be more clarity for institutions, for the investor, than the Clarity Act will probably provide. Think we already got that. In the news, I will be covering, again, Simply Fiat. We are going to be covering what happened in the S&P 500 this morning, a little bit of what Trump's been saying about the war. It's really about just the market's whipsawing right now and why I think that's making the case that a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines in cash, just trying to figure out what their positions are. And then to wrap up the show, dude, we have another cell phone coming from the EU. It just keeps getting worse over there. I don't know what they're doing. I feel bad for my European friends that are still there. Still very proud of my European ancestry, but man, the EU is cooked and they just keep doubling down. It's not about the digital ID. It's not about the CBDC. It's actually way worse in terms of Bitcoin and for you as a citizen. So that's today's show. I'll be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Bitcoin Well Infinite. If you're a serious Bitcoin buyer, you've probably hit the same wall. Most platforms make you give up custody just to play by the rules. Bitcoin Well Infinite fixes that. They're North America's only publicly traded, non-custodial OTC desk listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, which means transparent operations and zero counterparty risk.
You buy Bitcoin, you take immediate control, period. For trades over $50,000, you get a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, competitive spread starting at 1%, and immediate delivery straight to your own wallet. No custody risk, no withdrawal fees, just institutional grade execution with full asset control. If you want to buy Bitcoin the right way, book a free consultation at bitcoinwell.com/OTC or email infinite@bitcoinwell.com.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, StampSeed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed phrases really secure? StampSeed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need for you to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them down on paper. Paper is fragile. Titanium plates are strong. Your words are actually stamped into the titanium plate with this hammer and these letter stamping tools. Once the words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. And now you can customize your titanium seed plates. You can upload your design or logo, and they will laser engrave it on the back of your seed plate, the opposite side of where the words are. Stamp your seed on StampSeed and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the stampseed.com store.
All right, guys, you know I like looking at the chat, and I'm getting cooked. Scott Casper, the K is silent in escape. Did I say escape? I don't know. It's escape. Too much coffee this morning. It's too hot in here. I've got cotton mouth from all the coffee. Whatever. Dude, I don't know how I have a talk show. I can barely speak English, okay? I speak one language, and I can barely speak it, okay? Blame the public schools, all right? Blame my low IQ. All right, anyways. The current Bitcoin price is $70,490. The discount from all-time high is 44.1%. The market cap is $1.41 trillion. Looks like we have secured the 1.4, dude. It's not much, but it's something. 1.3 just kills me. Anyways, the block height, TikTok next block, the universal time on planet Earth is currently 941,897. Okay, so as I was telling you yesterday, the K is also solid, especially. Do I say especially? Especially? Wow, dude, I can't speak. All right, anyways. Okay, I'm getting cooked. All right, it's Monday, guys. Sheesh. All right. I'll work on my diction, my grammar, hopefully by tomorrow. Anyways, as I was telling you guys last week, this was the big news that came out of the SEC and the CFTC. I don't really remember what the title was of the show. Let me do a little throwback here. Let me do a little callback here. What did I say? Okay, so Wednesday's show, that probably the biggest Bitcoin announcement we have seen in over a year happen, which was the SEC and the CFTC come out with this joint memorandum to basically coordinate and officially work amongst the same rule set. For a long time, SEC did, rules by enforcement or law by enforcement, where we really didn't know what was happening in the Bitcoin industry. You do something and then you'd get in trouble, and then that would set the precedent moving forward. And that's kind of how we've been working in the space for a long time, until last week, when the SEC and the CFTC formally said, hey, we're going to coordinate here. And all of our framework, it's going to be very clear. You're going to know what's going on. This is, I think, probably the biggest, quote, clarity we've seen from any regulation, any institution, is what happened from the SEC and the CFTC. It is a huge news. I know a lot of you guys in the chat are like, oh, Opti and Nico, Simply Bitcoin keeps begging the government to help Bitcoin, to, give us some good rules so that we can do what we want to do. anarcho-capitalism, bro. You know, I get it. But we work on different rules. Well, hold on. Let me pull that back. We all work on one rule set. There is a law here. You know, there are laws we follow. But institutions look at different signals before they deploy capital. And for a long time, obviously, one, they weren't even allowed to go into Bitcoin. But two, the regulatory uncertainty was one of the signals that stopped them from deploying real capital. Now we're starting to see that, again, for better or worse, whether the Trump administration has been good for Bitcoin or not, it's up for debate. But we are seeing one thing. They have forced the institutions and the regulating bodies to take a more pro-Bitcoin stance. Yes, some of that is pro-shitcoin stance or pro-digital asset stance, and maybe it's not perfect if you are a hardcore Bitcoin maxi, a Bitcoin purist. It's probably you want a little more, but there is clear rules now. And we saw this clip on, I believe it's Fox News. Let me double check. It was totally Fox News. Yeah, it was on Fox News of Mike Selig, the chairman of the CFTC. And this is, I think, minus the Paul Atkins speech where he announced this, I'm pretty sure this is the first response we've heard from the CFTC. So let's listen to that real quick. And I think it's going to continue to make the case that this is probably the clarity that the institutions, that the regulatory bodies, it's probably the only clarity we're going to get. Okay, that's kind of my stance right now. I know maybe I'll talk about what the updates are with the Clarity Act itself, but I think this is probably the true clarity that the quote institutions wanted from the regulatory body. So here we go.
Framework. Walk us through what this new framework means and what you are trying to do here in terms of specifically identifying what's a security and what is a commodity.
For far too long, the prior administration left crypto in limbo. The SEC under Gary Gensler, led by enforcement, drove many of these crypto firms offshore, and this was really a tactic to create confusion as to what's a security and what's not under our regulatory framework and discourage creators, innovators, builders from developing their businesses here on shore. And so Chairman Atkins and I now have developed a new interpretation that will provide clarity once and for all as to what's a security and what's not, what's within the SEC's framework, what's within the CFTC's framework, and what types of offerings and sales of crypto assets implicate the securities laws. So for too long, when a company wants to come out and raise funds with a crypto asset, they weren't sure if they were subject to the securities laws. This framework lays out a really clear and simple roadmap for any company that wants to sell a crypto asset to raise capital, what their securities law obligations are, and then the status of the crypto asset, most importantly, under the securities laws. We need to draw a distinction between the capital raising activity, which typically is subject to the securities laws, and the crypto assets themselves, which generally speaking aren't. These are a type of digital good that can trade just like any other type of commodity in our markets. And the SEC and CFTC are now harmonizing our approaches to regulating these digital assets. It's also very important that we have legislation pending that this interpretation is intended to supplement and help in the interim as we're working through getting some future-proof legislation on the books.
Okay. I hope that made sense to you. So just to recap what he said, basically, which in my opinion is where it gets a little blurry, but he said, if you're raising capital with a token, it's a security, but the quote asset itself is a commodity or a digital commodity. That is a massive classification or clarification, but I don't know. Literally, when I hear that, obviously, I hear all shit coins are securities. Obviously, when the SEC and the CFTC announced this joint memorandum, they did also announce that 15 other tokens, I'm being nice here, were digital commodities, Bitcoin and 15 other shit coins. And some of those, in my opinion, and, you know, everyone has an opinion, I think some of those would necessarily fall under that classification that they are raising capital with a token, thus being a security. But hey, they're going to let Ether and Solana, and I forget what the other ones are, slide through as digital commodities. I guess now they're so big that they're no longer raising capital for a company, or I don't know. It's not my job to clarify this, but this is still a huge distinction from the Gary Gensler SEC and the previous CFTC where they were fighting each other. They are in harmony now, and it does reinforce something us Bitcoiners have known for a long time. Bitcoin isn't part of this debate. Bitcoin has no issuer. There is no fundraising event. There is no central entity. There is no company behind Bitcoin. Which means, in my opinion, obviously, it's the only digital commodity, but I won't pick at straws here. But it just shows that Bitcoin fundamentally sits outside of the securities laws framework, which I think is going to set really good precedent moving forward of, hey, you probably only want to put capital into Bitcoin if you are looking for, quote, a digital commodity. A lot of these other tokens, shitcoins, whatever you want to call them, they are very clearly securities. Now, it is interesting if we are seeing the SEC, CFTC pick and choose some of the winners and losers amongst the shitcoins. Maybe, maybe they got some bags in Solana or Ethereum or whatever. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just speculating, just putting together the incentives here. That's why they let it slide. But the rest of the industry is working to fit within the regulatory framework, but Bitcoin already lives outside of it. So from like a Bitcoiner perspective, this is why I think this is such a huge announcement. Yes, it's not the prettiest, it's not the flashiest, but this is regulatory clarity. Now, since we're using the clarity word, I think I've said it like 15 times in 10 minutes. We did see a recent announcement over the weekend. I actually saw another announcement this morning that apparently the White House is going to have a meeting to discuss the compromises of the Clarity Act. It seems like the banks have compromised on the stablecoin yield. So from everything I saw over the weekend, they're still maintaining that by the end of April, the Clarity Act should either get through or at least we're going to move further on in the Clarity Act. I'm still of the opinion, and I'll probably be wrong, and I'm not trying to FUD. I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm kind of the opinion that the regulatory clarity that we saw from the SEC and the CFTC, I know in the clip it said that it's going to be in partnership with the Clarity Act, and it's going to, that's really what's going to bring the regulatory clarity, but I think this might be all we get. Maybe I'm just burnt out and tired of politics. I don't have much faith in politicians. I personally don't have much faith in the system at all. But we'll see what happens. We got another month. I'm sure we'll hear something from this meeting that's supposedly going to happen this week around regulation, regulatory clarity, digital assets industry. So that's where we currently are. We have been covering the Clarity Act a lot in the last couple of weeks because it has been one of the contentious ideas, has been one of the hot button topics right now, especially because we are seeing Washington, D.C. be a little more pro-Bitcoin. And that also brings up another conversation. Is what we're seeing currently in the Bitcoin price, in the gold bear market, can we attribute some of the price action to a seemingly more pro-Bitcoin DC, a pro-Bitcoin federal government, at least in the United States? That is an interesting wrinkle to add on top to. We're probably seeing people hold into cash because of the liquidity crisis. We don't know what's going on with the war. There is a lot of uncertainty in the system. Bitcoin's kind of doing really well. Are people not just looking at Bitcoin as a sovereign, neutral store of value, digital money that no one controls? Or are they looking at Bitcoin and being, hey, we are going to get some regulatory clarity. I can have my institution invest a significant amount of our capital into this market. I can diversify my portfolio into this thing, and it's not going to get swatted away. It's not going to crash. It's not going to be outlawed. Now it is becoming part of the traditional financial rails. It is becoming part of the infrastructure of global finance because the Trump administration went so pro-Bitcoin, because Washington, D.C. is not wholly fighting this industry. Though I have my own, narcissistic, cynical view of that, where I kind of liked when they were fighting Bitcoin. Remember when they fought us and Bitcoin price went up? And compare that to when they embraced us and Bitcoin price went down. Yeah, I think I'm going to take they fight us and the Bitcoin price goes up. All right. I don't want to make myself laugh because someone says like, I hate when you laugh. Look, I have an eccentric laugh. If you've met me in person, I have one of those. Either you love or hate the laugh. So I'm trying not to make myself laugh here, but kind of want them to fight us again because I think that means Bitcoin will go up. I don't know. Can we all just reminisce here? Do the like go into a different world. Where would Bitcoin be if Kamala Harris was president? Would we be at 250K? A boy can dream. A boy can dream. All right, sorry. I failed. I made myself laugh. All right, anyways, we're going to go into the saga in the Middle East right now. So I know I'm getting tired of talking about this, but this is a financial show. This is simply fiat after all. And just craziness is happening right now. It's just absolutely nuts. Trump sends a tweet, markets go wild, sends another tweet, and they do the exact opposite that they did. Literally this morning, we saw this all take place in an hour. So that's what I'm going to cover in the news. I'll be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledn, the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Ledn lets you unlock the liquidity in your Bitcoin without ever having to sell it. Since 2018, they've issued over $10 billion in loans to more than 10,000 customers worldwide. I love these guys, and not only do I have an account with them, I also have a loan. And here's what really sets them apart. There are no monthly payments, and you can pay back the loan at any time. Once you send your Bitcoin as collateral, you can have cash in your account within 24 hours. Ledn has over 1,000 five-star customer reviews, and they've never lost a single dollar or single sat of customer funds. So if you want to tap into the wealth of your Bitcoin without having to sell it, head over to learn.ledn.io/simply today, and you'll get 0.25% off your first loan. I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones? They don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store. I want to give a shout out to our partner, BitKey. If you already self-custody your Bitcoin, you know the deal with hardware wallets by now. Complex setups, clumsy interfaces, and a seed phrase that can be lost, stolen, or forgotten. BitKey fixes that. BitKey is a multi-sig hardware wallet built by the team behind Square and Cash App. It packs a cryptographic recovery system and built-in inheritance feature into an intuitive, easy-to-use wallet with no seed phrase to sweat over. It's simple, secure, self-custody without the stress. Time named BitKey one of the best inventions of 2024. Get 20% off at bitkey.world. That's BITKEY.world. SELEKEY.world with the code SIMPLY.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm getting cooked. I didn't realize I said especially. Man, I'm I'm so self-conscious right now. Dude, is my especially like Nico's Pizza? This dude, rip, bro. It's so over for me today. Anyways, you guys don't care about this. I'm just having some fun with the chat. I'll get into the news. Okay, hold on. Serious face. I got to be stiff. I got to be serious when I report the news, or else you guys don't want to watch it. So give me a second. Here we go. Okay. So I know you guys don't like this. I mean, let me go back here. One of the main things that I truly loved about Bitcoin before last year, actually, one of the things that attracted me to Bitcoin in the first place is the idea that I didn't have to pay attention to politics. I didn't have to pay attention to what happened in the traditional financial world. I didn't have to pay attention to what happened in the fiat system. All I had to do was opt out of that fiat system, sell my dollars, acquire Bitcoin, accumulate more Bitcoin, provide value, in my job, in my day-to-day job, and just make sure that I'm saving in Bitcoin. And that's literally all you have to do. If you want to tune out of everything, the only signal you really need is, are you acquiring more Bitcoin? Everything else is out of our control. It's probably not mentally healthy. It's probably not good for our mental health to be paying attention to all this stuff. But it's also super entertaining. Okay. It's just super entertaining. It is about finances. It is about the financial world, economics. So it all does correlate with Bitcoin. Again, Bitcoin is a macro asset now. I think it's become very clear that Bitcoin is in the geopolitical macro conversation. Therefore, this is why I cover all this stuff. And I know some people are like, you guys are simply fiat now. You guys are simply gold, simply politics. Well, the beauty of Bitcoin is that it does touch every single aspect, every single discipline in the world. If you look hard enough, whether it's health, whether it's wealth, whether it's longevity, whether it's, the weather, Bitcoin connects with every single discipline that you could be interested in. And what we're seeing come out of the Trump administration currently is, it's very interesting. I think I've been overusing the word interesting today. I'm being super self-conscious because now I guess I say especially. So what's another word for interesting? It is... I'm going to use entertaining. It's super entertaining what's going on with Trump right now. So if you weren't aware, if you weren't on Twitter, if you don't like Trump, you don't follow Trump's tweets, which I think you should be following them because he's literally moving the markets by its true social posts. We got this one this morning, which is at 7:23 a.m. Eastern, I believe. I'm guessing. This morning, we got this tweet from Donald Trump, and he goes, I am pleased to report that the United States of America and the country of Iran have had, over the last 2 days, very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. Based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week, I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. What's interesting about this is you got to remember on Friday, he said, we're going to have a 48-hour ultimatum. If Iran doesn't come to the table, we're going to blow up their oil infrastructure. And then Monday mornings, right before the markets open, we get this prolonged 5-day break from the operation, the mission, the war, whatever you want to call it in the Middle East, which a lot of people have been saying it's very interesting. Bond markets are going absolutely crazy. And then Trump basically says, hey, we're not going to blow anything up until the markets close on Friday. See where I'm going with this? We're going to just take a pause because the market's open on Monday morning and the bond market is going absolutely nuts. S&P 500 is going nuts, and I'll show you some of the numbers here. And then he's like, hold on. We're going to pause for 5 days until the weekend so that the markets get a break. So he's just like, we're pausing. We're pausing until Friday night, and then we're probably going to hear something insane. That's the weekly forecast for this, okay? Let's zoom out to what happened this morning, which is obviously just even crazier, in my opinion. Look, I find this super interesting. I hope you guys do too. I scratch my own itch here. I think this is probably the most interesting thing happening this morning. And here we got, again, you guys know, I really love Kobayashi Letter's Twitter account. I think they've been doing great journalism, great economic coverage recently in the face of this war. So they go. This is absolutely insane. At 7:04 a.m. Eastern time today, President Trump said, quote, the U.S. and Iran have had productive discussions to end the Iran war. By 7:10 a.m. Eastern time, the S&P 500 surged plus 240 points, adding $2 trillion in the market cap. And you can see here on the chart, the bottom of the tweet, or the bottom of this green candle was when he tweeted. And then at the very top, literally 5 minutes later, we saw S&P 500 add $2 trillion. Then 27 minutes later, Iran completely denied all of President Trump's claims and said there has been, quote, no contact with the U.S. By 8 o'clock Eastern, the S&P 500 had fallen to negative 120 points, erasing $1 trillion in market cap. That's $3 trillion swing market cap in 56 minutes in the S&P 500. What is happening? Bro, the S&P 500 is trading like a shitcoin. Oil prices are trading like a shitcoin. We have gold crashing like a shitcoin. And Bitcoin's just kind of chilling. We're like, what is happening right now? Like, what in the world? And then just to update this, this was right before I went on the show. Kobayashi Letter retweeted or tweeted again. The S&P 500 extends gains to plus 150 points on the day, rising 2.3%, adding $1.2 trillion in market cap. Are markets beginning to price in an end to the war? Or is Trump lying? Is Trump lying here? I know some people in the chat are going to be like, Trump's lying. Or are the markets pricing in the war is going to end exactly as they said, the 4-week mark? I don't know. I'm watching along just like you are. I'm following the tweets. I'm trying to make sense of, are markets chilling? Is the war over? Because I'm going to make a guess. I'm probably going to be wrong, but by 5 p.m. today, I'm sure we're going to get another tweet. And the markets are going to be pricing that in, and we're going to get even more fun in the market. So just, in case you're confused, Geiger Capital goes, Iran called Trump's bluff on his 48-hour deadline, and now it's been extended to 5 days. The markets are trying to price that in. And the real reason for this is not because what happened in oil. I think that was last week. What we saw happen in oil, I think that is why we got the announcements and the posturing that we got from Trump last week. I think that was the reason. I think this week the reason is because of bond yields. The bond market is going insane. 10-year yield breaks 4.4%. Here's the 1-month chart. This is almost as catastrophic as higher oil prices. Potentially, arguably, higher bond yields is worse than higher oil prices. Maybe not for you as an individual, but for the economy at large. As QE Infinity says, consumers borrowing money is going to crater. Lending and mortgage rates will soar. Goodnight housing markets, autos, and commercial real estate, an absolute disaster. This is why I am part of this opinion that this is why we got a 5-day pause in the quote war operation mission. I don't even know what they're calling it. I'm going to just say war. Okay. When I say war, don't actually me here, bro. But I think this is what's happening. The markets aren't really sure what's going on. Is it going to be a forever war? Are we going to be there longer than 4 weeks? Are there going to be boots on the ground? Oil went absolutely insane last week. And then I don't know if I covered it on the show, but towards the end of last week, you know, the Strait of Hormuz was closed. Oil went insane. And then we saw a Sly Scott Besson announcement. I think it was Friday afternoon, saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to unsanction Iranian oil." With like now, you know, hey, we're winning this war. You know, we bombed all their infrastructure. They have nothing they can do, but this war is going to continue on for a while. They're also closing the Strait of Hormuz, but no one actually cares about the Strait of Hormuz. But wait, actually, we're going to go in and secure the Strait of Hormuz. And then Friday evening, Trump said something on the lines of, we actually don't care about the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to let our allies that need it to handle that. Because when you think about it, when you understand the technicalities of this, we don't really, the U.S., by we, I mean the U.S., doesn't get much oil from the Strait of Hormuz. That's really for, you know, China and like Asia and parts of Europe. Our oil doesn't necessarily come through the Strait of Hormuz, but I think the number is somewhere between 20 and 30% of global oil does go through there. And we were hearing rumors that the Iranians, the Persians, were only allowing some oil to go through, but only for their partners. So it was going to Russia and China, and I think India. And then shortly afterwards, heard like, no, we're going to unsanction Iranian oil. We actually don't even want the Strait of Hormuz. And now markets open today. And again, I was expecting the markets, at least in Bitcoin, to get absolutely cratered today. But Bitcoin goes up and bond yields are going up. And we know what the Trump administration really wanted to do. The Mar-a-Lago Accord. They want bond yields, interest rates to go lower. They want to print more money. And they're printing more money and bond yields are going up. So to all the plan trusters out there, you know, don't throw tomatoes at me. But I don't know if there is a plan. Okay. All right. I think they're literally just doing things. You can just do things. No, actually, the best take I heard was that from the tariffs to Venezuela to Iran, what Trump has been doing, and Tom Luongo retweeted it. I didn't bring it up right now, but I'm reminding that this is probably a good place to say it, that everything he's been doing is to facilitate global trade in a direction that is beneficial for the U.S. So that's probably the more optimistic, less cynical view of this, that all of these operations are, if you think of them in terms of global trade, then you'll start to understand better of what these moves are doing. And instead of it seeming so chaotic and random, if you think of it in terms of global trade, maybe a global reordering, a global shifting of global trade, then all of this stuff might make a little more sense to you. I still have to kind of dive a little deeper into that idea, but that does make some sense. Anyways, I just brought up Tom Luongo, so I think it'd be fitting that I also bring up Simon Dixon. You know, these are the kind of the two opposing views currently, though, as I've mentioned before, they're very similar views. There's just some stark, you know, contrast. There's some divergence there, but when I hear both of them, they're kind of saying the same thing. They just have different endpoints, you know, different vantage points. But here is Simon Dixon's take. And he goes, everybody told me I don't understand this war. Many told me it was World War III and a nuclear bomb will be fired. I said the market disagrees and the outcome has already been agreed. Trump now says the U.S. and Iran have had a very good and productive conversation regarding a complete and total resolution of the Iran war. Trump has ordered the Department of War to postpone, quote, any and all strikes against Iranian power plants. Let's see what comes next. he followed this up, or actually, I think this came out earlier. Yeah, this was yesterday. And he goes, if Trump's serving the financial industrial complex, then it all starts to make sense. The military industrial complex just got a $200 billion stimulus check. Big oil and liquid natural gas received their own stimulus boosts. The public picks up the tab while losses are socialized and profits are privatized. With another round of money printing flowing straight to the banks as a result of the energy crisis. Even Russia gets its own stimulus, fueling further energy sales at record prices and prolonging the fragmentation of Ukraine. The World Economic Forum advances its surveillance state agenda alongside the tech industrial complex off the back of supply chain disruptions and inflation, just like 2020. Quote, you will own nothing and be happy. Follow the money. Absolutely insane. And just to add, again, I've been talking about the Kobayashi letter playbook, the conflict playbook, and he goes, you can't make this up. Exactly 23 days into the war, and our conflict playbook is literally tracking down to the day. President Trump has just announced peace talks between the U.S. and Iran are ongoing, with step 9 of our playbook imminent. While many called for World War III, we called for a 2 to 4 week conflict, and we are right in the middle of that timeline. The S&P 500 just swung $3 trillion in market cap. Oil prices are below $89 a barrel. Gold is up $300 an ounce, though it's off its highs, and bonds are rebounding. As we have seen endlessly over the last 12 months, objective investors are winning the most in this market. While there will be much more volatility, it appears that step 9 and step 10 of our playbook are imminent. Keep following our playbook. Go read the playbook. I can't break that down easily. It actually probably be like a whole show. And yeah, that's where we are. Actually, one more. Before I give you guys the meme, we have James Van Straten again doing really good tweets, really good analysis. He does work at CoinDesk, so we won't fault him too much. He goes, the game is so obvious. There's always a taco, or Trump always chickens out, or a Fed put just around the corner. The market just had to find its max pain point. And today was the bond market. Tomorrow, it's going to be something else. We are seeing this constantly play out. Trump does something. There's a huge pain point that is highlighted. He pulls back. It's almost Hegelian in that sense. Or is it Hegelian? Maybe I'm tripping. It's the playbook where it's the art of the deal, really. And you could argue maybe he's not doing so well in his art of the deals, but you over ask for something, they freak out. The person you're negotiating with freaks out. And then you get something less than what you initially asked because it seems like a smaller ask, but that's exactly what you wanted in the first place. It does seem like that is playing out. But I did tell you I have a meme for you. So shouts out to our boy, Mark Goodwin. And he goes, picture of the Oval Office with Lutnick and Bassett and Trump. And he goes, they turned the Oval Office into a trading desk. Who could be so surprised? Who could be so surprised? I don't know if you guys saw, and I don't know if this is real, but there was another meme coming around. Oh, my voice. My voice sounds better in a loyal register. I know. I get so excited that I get nasally. I know. I'm trying to not get so excited because then it does go nasally. But thank you. I appreciate it. I don't know if you saw. Sorry, tangent. I'm like a ADD. I'm like a dog, chasing a car over here. Did you see the tweet? I don't know if this is real, but there was a tweet going around, and I'm going to keep moving. I am rambling here. But there was a tweet that I saw this morning, and it was Trump's desk. And apparently there's a button. Again, this could be AI, this could be fake, but it's an interesting meme, to say the least. And he's got a button, and it's apparently short oil button. And every time he presses it, it just locks in a short on oil. Again, I don't think it's real, but the image of it, the mental image of it is interesting. And shouts out to our boy, Mark Goodwin. Go read his book, The Bitcoin Dollar System, I believe. Go follow Mark. He's been on the ball for years at this point. It does seem like they've turned the White House into a trading desk. Dude, Barron Trump is out here making a bag, bro. Making a bag. I wish I had that that information. Okay. All right, guys. I do got to move on. We have some interesting news coming out of the EU. It's pretty terrifying if you live in Europe, but this does go into the culture of this show of what I believe Bitcoiners should be doing, which is, of course, taking your Bitcoin into self-custody. So I'll be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy, HIVE has quadrupled its global Bitcoin mining footprint and channels that same scale into high performance compute, where their AI cloud is now ranked #1 in the world for network performance. At HIVE, you've got dual engines, Bitcoin and AI humming, roaring, accelerating in unison. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're rewriting the playbook on sustainable digital infrastructure. You can catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech or at hivedigitaltech.com.
You guys are funny in the chat. Yeah. We just need 5 days to flatten Iran. I mean, the curve. That was brutal. I'm sorry. Okay. Alrighty then. Dude, I'm gonna get so canceled. Nico, I didn't say that. Guys, don't clip that. Hey, we have a little fun. It's joking. I'm joking. We're joking. It's a joke. It's a joke, guys. I'm sorry. All right. Anyways. The Rage. You guys know I love The Rage. Shouts out to Lola Leach. She's doing, I would argue, the best investigative journalism in Bitcoin from a very hardcore position. This is why I'm a huge fan of The Rage. You know, let me see. How many followers? 6,000 followers. Dude, wholly under followed. Everyone that has a Twitter account, go follow The Rage. I highlight her work all the time. Maybe, I know she's like an on, but maybe we got to get her on the show because she's killing it. Anyways, they tweeted this morning, and it goes, the EU prepares to issue standardized guidance for the surveillance of, quote, self-hosted wallets. The EU Anti-Money Laundering Authority, or the AMLA, is preparing to issue guidance for the technical requirements to surveil transactions between, quote, self-hosted wallets and accounts held with crypto asset service providers. The guidance will lay out what steps crypto asset service providers must take to identify the owner of a self-custodial address as required by the EU's transfer of funds regulation in effect since December 2024. The guidance will be issued by July 2027. And she's got a screenshot here, and it goes, by July 10th, 2027, the AMLA shall issue guidelines to specify the mitigating measures referred to in paragraph 1, including A, the criteria and means for identification and verification of the identity of the originator or beneficiary of a transfer made from or to a self-hosted address, including through reliance on third parties, taking into account the latest technological developments. And B, criteria and means for the verification of whether or not the self-hosted address is owned or controlled by a customer. So I think, reading this leniently, it's just like they're, just KYCing. KYC, AML, exchanges, like, what's new here, right? I think that's the kind of flippant view of this. The probably more tinfoil hat view of this. It sounds like the EU wants to KYC every single Bitcoin wallet or self-custody wallet, which is obviously they're not going to be able to do that. But it just goes to show, what has the EU been doing? One, they're trying to roll out the digital ID. The European Central Bank has been doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on a CBDC, and apparently it's going to be coming by the end of this year. They've been doing whatever they can to outlaw privacy. Now it seems they want to KYC Bitcoin wallets or your keys. They want to make sure that you verify that you are the holder of a certain address, and they're going to give guidelines for crypto asset service providers to follow. So it sounds like if you are an exchange in Europe by 2027, if you cannot confirm someone's identity that they actually hold this address and you're sending them digital assets or Bitcoin to this address and you can't verify it as them, then you're probably not going to be able to send Bitcoin to that wallet. That is my short read of this. So it sounds like they're trying to KYC every European that wants to custody their Bitcoin. And further, you got to attach your identification, your meat self to your Bitcoin wallet. Literally doing one of my biggest fears for Bitcoin. They're trying to implement this as law, which is Bitcoin is either a tool for freedom, where we do have some pseudonymity. We do have some, benefit of the doubt here, where you can use Bitcoin semi-privately. It's not private. It's a transparent ledger. But if they don't know what this address is, who it's from, then you can use Bitcoin in a way that people maybe can track the money moving in and out of the address, but they don't know necessarily who it is unless you tell them that this is my address, this is my wallet. Sounds like the EU is basically going to force by law that you have to connect your identity to a Bitcoin wallet address or a self-custodial wallet. It's absolutely insane. Again, as much as I'm a pro-Bitcoin advocate, as much as I'm optimistic about Bitcoin, I am also very hyper aware of the fact that Bitcoin can be used as a tool of freedom, or it could be used as a totally surveilled system. It's completely transparent. If everyone is KYC'd in Bitcoin, if every wallet is KYC, if you can't use a wallet in Bitcoin, which theoretically doesn't make sense, but if you can't interact, or rather you go to jail if you don't KYC your Bitcoin, then seemingly a lot of people would just connect their government ID to a wallet. That doesn't really account for the fact that I can spin up more wallets, et cetera, et cetera. But then that probably cuts you off from, ever connecting to a, quote, crypto asset service provider. And if everyone is KYC'd, if every person's Bitcoin or Bitcoin address has an identity attached to it, we just created our gilded cage. We just created the digital panopticon that we're trying to fight. This is why we are such huge advocates for privacy. This is why we are such huge advocates for Lightning Network and a layer 2 that has privacy built into it. This is why we completely freaked out when the Samurai Wallet devs got arrested. This is why we brought up the Tornado Cash case, even though it had to do with Ethereum, because you were seeing that not only in the US, but in Europe, in the West, and obviously around the world, there is this move. There is this fight against privacy. They do not want you to have privacy. And they're trying to dress it up in all kinds of flowery language so that you feel bad for wanting to have some privacy. So you feel bad about, or you feel like a criminal for wanting to have some semblance of privacy, for not wanting to, let it all hang out and let the government institutions know everything about you, because what do you have to hide, bro? Well, I'm a simple man. Without getting too graphic, I'm pretty free at my house, and I like some curtains, okay? I'm not always dressed up, in a 3-piece suit at my house, if you catch my drift, okay? I like privacy. I like the ability to pick and choose what people know, what they don't know. This doesn't make me a criminal, and I think we should have that right when it comes to our finances. Doesn't make me a criminal because I don't want everyone to know everything about me. I think it makes me a normal person. And they're going to continue to do stuff like this. They're going to continue to make it seem like you're a bad person if you want to maintain some kind of privacy. Now, this is just crazy to me. Like, they're going to make a law so that they KYC every single self-custody wallet. Every European Bitcoin address will have a European government ID attached to it. Nothing could go wrong. I'm sure nothing could go wrong. I'm sure the government is super good when it comes to their data. They've never had data breaches. identity leaks. I'm sure nothing can go wrong here. Just trust the EU. Trust Chrissy Lagarde and what's her name? Ursula von der Leyen with your ID connected to your finance. I'm sure it's going to be good. I'm sure it's going to be a good time. I'm sure nothing can go wrong. I'm sure everything's going to be okay. I'm sure they got this under control. They're professionals. They're from the institutions. They're trusted. They would never do you wrong. Yeah. Miss me with that. Okay. Miss me with that. It is always about control, and it will always be about control. They do not want the peasants to revolt. They do not want the laymen to have any sense of freedom. They want to stay at the top of the castle. It's absolutely sick. EU. I know I have some European people that watch the show, and I don't ever mean to attack you when I say this, but Europe's cooked, guys. And I'm, as an American, I just really don't want to see what we're seeing happen in Europe happen in the US. And there is a growing trend of mass surveillance happening, a digital panopticon being built out, an AI data-driven surveillance system being built out, not only in Europe, but in the US. And it is a scary future. If that is the future we're going in, it's not a good future. It's as dystopian a sci-fi film as you could ever watch, and it could be our lives. It could be our day-to-day, or maybe not ours, maybe our children's and their children's. But that's not the world I want to live in. So doing my duty here to highlight this. I think the fix is always the same thing. Stack Bitcoin, take it into custody. Don't share your identity with your Bitcoin wallets. Just continue to do this. If enough of us do this, we're unstoppable. As of now, though, we don't have the numbers on our side yet. We have the technology. We don't have the numbers. We need more people taking Bitcoin into custody, more people avoiding Wall Street ETF products, more people securing their Bitcoin, more people transacting with their Bitcoin. And that's how we win. No one said it was going to be easy. No one said it was going to happen overnight. I think this is what we're going to be doing for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Who knows? Maybe I'm being a little cynical. Maybe I'm being pessimist fields here. Maybe this happens a lot quicker than I think. Maybe in 5 years, by 2030, it's end game times and Bitcoin's winning and we live in utopia. I don't know about that, but we live in a better world, okay? I won't say utopia, but we live in a better world. I'm hopeful. You got to have hope. You got to have hope, or else what's the point of waking up every day? So we're putting in the good fight. Make sure you tell people to hold their Bitcoin in their own custody. Maybe they don't need to do all of it, but they should have a good portion of their holdings in their own control. And don't ever let any government tell you that you need to connect your identity to your Bitcoin because it's from a safety, bro. Miss me with that. Okay. So, hey, we're gonna be covering the good and the bad as we continue. It might get a little darker. I'm not gonna lie, last week, where the world is going, I did get a little black pill. I was a little doomish, and I'm really trying not to complain. I'm really trying not to be a doomer, because doomers never win. Doomers are losers. We are optimists. We are winners. We are going to win. Remember, the good guys win in the end. It's always darkest before the dawn. So buckle up, get yourself ready mentally, physically, financially. Try to get yourself in a position where if the worst comes to worst, you're still in a good place. Whether that means, whatever that means to you personally, be sovereign. I know some people think sovereignty means, hey, I live in a farm. Maybe that's not what I want to. That's not what I want to do. I'm a city boy. But we all got to do what we can for ourselves to get ourselves in a position where we have total, maybe not total, but max freedom. Where we do have flexibility, where we are capable of being mobile. I think that's the move. It's what's the saying? I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. That's what we're doing here, guys. So I don't mean to end the show a little doomerish today, but we can't sugarcoat this. Let's look at reality with a clear, clear-eyed view. Let's look at it. Yes, we have an orange lens on it, but, let's look at reality as clearly as possible. And remember, always remember, be not afraid, my friends. It's nothing to fear. So if you get afraid, and I felt that in myself last week, I was like seeing the stuff, like there was a split second where like, it's like, oh, whoa, like I'm kind of afraid. I always had to remember, like, you can't logically think if you are afraid, if you're in fear mode. We move from a place of love, guys. We're going to win. It's not going to be easy, but we got this. All right. Anyway, City Slicker. Luke, I am a city slicker. Yes, I am a city boy. I have not ever milked a cow, though I did grow up on a farm for a little bit. I didn't milk cows, but I did feed horses and pigs and llamas. My aunt had a farm when I grew up, and I was up at 5 a.m. in the cold feeding them, and I absolutely hated it. Never again. No ill will to people that enjoy that and like that. Dude, it wasn't for me. I'm not good in the morning when it's early, and I'm not good in the cold. So I'm very willing to pay a good price to my farmer, to my butcher. I know they're very useful. I'm their ideal customer, okay? All right, guys. Okay, I'm rambling. I'm having fun. We have a little fun. We're having a little fun here, okay? We're having a little fun. It is Monday. You already know the deal. We will be back all week. Monday through Friday, we go live at around 12:40. I know it says 12:16, but it takes me, I post it, and then it takes me some time to get everything I need for the show. So I'm not just sitting here at 12:16 and I'm making you guys wait 30 minutes. I get the show up so that you guys know it's up, an hour, hopefully an hour-ish early. And then I prepare the show, but I go live usually 12:40 Monday through Friday. This has been Simply Bitcoin Live. If you like the channel, oh wait, almost forgot one thing. Almost forgot. Shout out to the boys over at Bitcoin Magazine. We will be at Bitcoin Las Vegas this year, 2026. It will be held at the Venetian April 27th through the 29th. Make sure you get your passes. And if you do buy your tickets, I would say buy them now. Prices are going to go up. No, I don't. Probably not the best sell. So I'm not going to say it. Anyways, just use the promo code Simply, all caps, I believe, and you get 10% off. Again, scan the QR code or go to, what's the website? Go to 2026.b.tc to get your tickets to Bitcoin Las Vegas today. All right, guys. I forgot where I was going with this stuff earlier. But anyways, love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll be back. Oh, yeah. I know what I was going to say. If you like the show, subscribe. If you don't like me, that's all right. I'm okay with this. My ego's not that fragile. We have a bunch of other content creators on our channel. Pick and choose who you like, okay? We got Dante, Oceans, Rustin, Sophie. And then you got the live show with me and Nico. It's basically my show. This live show is my show now. Nico, dude, guys, between you and us, between you and me, we're taking Nico out to the pasture, bro. No, I'm trolling. I need Nico. I love Nico. I think the show's better when there's back and forth. Anyways. Peace out, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.